What's up, all you Oscar loving fans out there? This is another episode of Color Commentary, Colorful Conversations by Colorful People about Christianity, culture, and race. And I'm your host, Marcus Lloyd. And with me, as always, is Mr. Antoine Malone. What's happening, Antoine?
Hey, what's up, everybody? How y'all doing today?
Why you sound so down, man? I mean, why you got to start? This is supposed to have some energy starting the show, and you
I
just
know it. I don't have it today, man.
no energy.
I'm in a state of frustration.
I am in agreement
at the moment
Yes.
for multiple reasons, but we're going to talk about one of those reasons.
That's fair.
I think right now.
Yeah, so we decided, to jump in. We don't usually do a live right now, but decided to jump in, just kind of a bonus because we were frustrated about an incident that happened yesterday. The slap heard round the world, as they say. Mr. Will Smith slapping Mr. Chris Rock on national television in front of millions of people on the Academy Awards. And so I know for me, like I was not even watching it at the time. Like I was kind of in and out. I was kind of doing some stuff. And you texted me and you're like, hey, man, what tell me about this Chris Rock? And I'm like, what is it? What am I supposed to see? And you're like, you'll know it when you see it. Immediately I was like, all right, let me go over to my recording of the Oscars and start to kind of pan through and see what's happening. And when I got
the
to
undeniable moment of the night.
Oh my gosh. And you didn't prep me at all for this moment.
Nope.
Like I was not prepped. Lisa was watching it in another room and she hadn't gotten there either. And so I went and watched it like probably 7 times. Cause I was like, did I just see, I remember I texted you, I was like, wait, did I just see Will Smith slap Chris Rock on national television? And then Lisa, because I told her, hey, has Chris Rock come up as she was watching it? She goes, no. And so she texted me where I was. She's like, hey, you want to see Chris Rock? I was like, no, but you're going to want to see it. And so got in there and watched it. So so we'll get right in. We're going to deal with a couple of things for those of you who are coming in and listening, a couple of angles, just so you'll know where we're going.
I'm sure people are probably fatigued by it by now.
I don't think they are. I really
It's been the talk of the day.
I don't think they are at all.
Not yet.
I think that, people had to go to work. They had to kind of figure out.
True.
The work is not necessarily the call. It doesn't have the, the water cooler as much anymore. So, you're just sitting on Zoom calls or by yourself or whatever. So hopefully this is a chance for people to talk about it. We're going to talk about it from a church angle. We're going to talk about it from a Black angle. We're going to talk about it from the Academy Award angle, society, patriarch. Did I miss any major angles that we'll hit?
No, we'll see. We'll see if we get all those angles in.
Yeah, that's true. So let's jump in even right now. So what initial feelings when it happened? What's up, Oscar?
What's up, Oscar?
And I'd love to hear as people are coming in, like, what was your initial reaction when you saw this slap heard around the world? So Antoine, what was your, other than texting me and going, hey, are you watching this?
Hey, are you watching this right now?
What was your initial reaction?
Like everybody, probably just shock, probably shock and disbelief. You like wondering if it's real or not. I think almost everybody was like, is this a bit? You have two relative comedians, and so you wondering, is this a bit? At first, it didn't look like he had actually slapped him to me,
it was like
but the camera had been so quick. And so I wasn't sure, but then it jumped in and it was we saw
they cut the sound. I was like,
as soon as they cut the sound, and then you saw, at that point there's no sound, so you see the mouthing of Will Smith. There
was definitely one word in there that I definitely
telling Chris Rock, offering some constructive advice for Chris Rock
about the way he says things and who he can say things about.
And who he can say it about. Yeah. So once I saw that, I thought, wow, that happened. And then after shock was disappointment, man. Was just but not at anyone in particular. It was disappointment at the scene that it had happened.
Yeah.
So I can't say that I was like mad at Will or mad at Chris. I just was mad that happened.
That it happened. Yeah, I was trying to figure out. I was kind of the same way. I was trying to figure out, like, what do I think about this? It was such a complicated moment for me in the midst of all what's going on. And part of it is all these angles that we're thinking about. And it doesn't necessarily end right there, right?
No.
You have to take into account the things that happened afterward, right? You have, Sean Combs coming out and talking about, hey, maybe we'll deal with some of this at the after party, right?
Yeah.
You have
frustrating, right? That too, for me.
Hey, there it is. And then you have Will Smith's acceptance award. He wins
Yeah,
the
of
Best Actor award.
course.
So now you have to kind of take in the midst of that that speech, he's crying, he's talking about protecting his family, making connections between the King Richard character and potentially he even himself in the moment that we witnessed, several minutes before.
Yeah.
And then of course there's aftermath, right? So there's lots of discussion around what
Mhm.
what history those two had with Jada, if you will. Uh,
Mhm.
Even going back to 2016, 2018, and so there's different stories along the way. So, but again, in that moment, it was a very complicated moment for me. So,
Yeah.
I was
It
I
it
was
wasn't
disappointed.
complicated for me until Will gave his speech. Well, it was let me take that back.
Yeah,
It was a little complicated before that, but it got more complicated,
increasingly.
significantly more
Yeah.
complicated once he gave his speech for me.
Okay. Well,
Um,
let's work from that moment of the slap, and then we'll work outward from there.
yeah, yeah.
So we got the slap. What complicated it, or not what complicated, but what are some of the things that you were thinking there in that moment?
Yeah, I just thought that, again, we work, we as in, and let me define we here. We as in the Black community in
Okay.
America have, been working very hard and diligent at getting a shot at things. And no one's going to be surprised at what I'm about to say because no doubt you have heard someone say it today.
Right.
But, you know, it was an unfortunate um, confirmation to the bigots and the prejudiced and the white supremacists and white racists around us that Black people can't do anything without drama. And I don't agree with that, by the way. I'm not
Sure.
affirming that idea, but that picture will now creates an affirmation for people to say, see, this is why we don't let you guys do things.
Right.
Now, look, we've done a lot of things, and again, I'm not adding a whole lot of credence to that statement, but I would rather us not have a situation where the angry Black man unfortunately shows up and affirms the sort of stereotype, even if I understand why it happened. And
Mhm.
that's the complication. That's part of the complication. One of the things I told my wife right away was like, man, somebody's not going to get hired tomorrow because of this. You know,
Mhm.
like the reverberation of what something like that does in this contentious culture right now,
Yeah.
where those who are anti speaking up for the marginal um want any reason to not speak up for the marginal. You gave them fuel, you gave them ammunition, and that part of it is just very, very frustrating, and we won't be able to track what that means for Black people in the next coming weeks in
Yeah.
individual things. And those are just things that we see. So that's one of the that was the initial um thought, pain point. And again, it wasn't even about Will, Jada, and Chris. It was about the Black community and the fact that it was produced by Black people, and
Yeah.
very clearly and intentionally giving room and space for Black people to do things. And that happens. And then of course Diddy comes out and it's a joke, but it only furthers a certain kind of stereotype. So it's just complicated.
See, and I wasn't mad at Diddy because I think that what he opened up is this recognition that at least as the Black community, a lot of times what we talk about is that you got to handle this stuff out of the public eye because of what you
True,
just said, right? Like
true.
I think that that's what complicated it for me. Like when I think about even the work that we do in trying to help people think about cross-cultural engagements, right? They're talking about diversity, and you're talking about predominantly white spaces, which I have grown up in and I have seen and I've experienced firsthand for 42 years. The thing I have witnessed and experienced is not that it's in every community, but definitely in the ones I've experienced, is that everybody's okay with you as the Black person until the angry Black person shows up, right? And then all of a sudden you lose
Right,
all of your opportunities, your things. You become the very thing
right.
that they told you. In fact, I remember that when I was doing a show, the show that I met my Lisa doing, Guys and Dolls, something we were in this long run, and there was a guy who I was doing the show with. Long story short, he ended up kind of hitting me on stage purposely, like aggressively, while we were doing just a dance, right? And he knocked like all my props off or whatever. It was middle of the show, right? Like nobody,
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody saw it. I couldn't tell you, but I was hot. I was mad. This is a white dude. And so I go back in the dressing room, kind of get my Vaseline ready for my hands, you know what I mean? My brass knuckles, right? Like, cause I'm going to handle this with this cat. And an older black man, he wasn't that much older, but he came in and he goes, man, I know what you are about to do. And let me just tell you that I have done what you're about to do. And I can tell you, when you do that, you prove to them everything they thought you were. And so I want to encourage you to think of another way to handle this. And that was really, that was something that really has engaged and had me think about, kind of my whole life. And I think that's where I was with Will. Will is he's this perfect picture. He has been the poster child for bridging between like Black and white community. Now, the frustrating part about what I saw last night is I was so understandingly aware of the white gaze and how it determines so many things in, I would say, Hollywood and other places. I was continually reminded of that. I had to think about that because Will is a great bridge builder. You could go back to when we were growing up, right? Like the white friends are not going to listen to Ice Cube, but they're going to listen to Will Smith. So they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I really like this hip hop, but this gangster rap, we don't want any of this. So Will bridge that. Will could play roles that weren't for Black people. He could just play whatever role. Denzel does very similar, right? He's kind of, these are representations of the merger. These are the folks that when I go to churches and I say, when you're going to hire diversity, you want to hire a person like a Will Smith who can speak to the Black community and the white community. They see him as part of their own. And you have this poster child that shows up now in front of millions of people all across the world and proves to the bigots and those who are out there who think about Black people a certain way that there is no good Black person, right? That if Will Smith can't do it, then no one. Now, that doesn't account for all the pressure that he is under, because the question I ask myself is what happened to him that made him respond this way?
Right. And it's clearly more than,
it's got to be.
It's clearly more than, this one incident. And, Will and Jada, they've been going through it. Like, as far as just in the news, they've been going through it for more than everyone's going back to the entanglement and the red chair or red table, whatever it is that Jada's show is. But really, they've been dealing with stuff since Willow and their kids. Like they've been facing parenting issues. He's been dealing with, if you will, attacks on his family. For not just Jada, but for years, since whatever the new Karate Kid was. You remember when young is it Jaden? Is that his son's name?
That's the one.
Young Jaden. So right then it was fine, but immediately after that, so whenever that movie was, add a year, and then from that moment on, Will has been dealing with people, voices who are not his own family, speaking about him and his family, for better or for worse. And he's been under a lot of pressure. And then of course, there's obviously the issue with the red table and
all the alopecia
and all the potential emasculation of the world knowing that your wife, is doing this thing and him dealing with that. And anyway, so I think there's a complicated, collection of events that leads him to a place where, you know what, tonight's supposed to be my night. I'm supposed to get respect tonight, not be disrespected. Right. And suddenly something clicks and he gets up and he does that, and I think there's a lot that went into that.
Yeah. And the part of where I think is important and where I disappointed with Will is like, I don't think he had to do that. Like his
right.
What's the word? Presence. The fact that he was in that room in that moment was, I would hope, enough for him. that he didn't have to prove his masculinity any kind of way. Because as much as Chris Rock wants to make fun of Will Smith or whatever, like nobody's paying $20 million to see Chris Rock's movies. They're not doing it.
True.
Nobody's looking to give Chris Rock an Oscar. Like the only reason Chris Rock was there is to do a presentation. He wasn't sitting center seat waiting to get a potential Oscar for Best Actor. Like he didn't have that.
Yeah.
So it's like that. It's like you get in, like there's places where you don't have to engage in some of that stuff, right? Like you got to deal with, what are you doing and stay on track with that. And that's hard because people can, they throw shade around. Like I'm even looking at 100% True. I don't know if they're trying to throw shade at me or not right here. Right. But part of it, I'd be curious. Like it sounds like it says, seems like Marcus is the kind of brother who would apologize to Will and later cry in his room. I'm curious who 100% True is, if they're throwing shade or not. But it's that same thing. It's like, that's the kind, if that is a kind of shade, like say 100% True is trying to throw at me, I'm the one with the microphone, that's articulating and trying to engage in the problem, right? And so that's where I don't think it has to be this act. And so I was frustrated with that.
Yeah, but at the same time with Will, again, if you get into that mindset, there's a part of him, because everyone who, again, whenever we talk about rational, when someone acts irrationally, right? We say this all the time about race. We say when what looks like an irrational moment happens, it's usually the product of fear or trauma, right?
Yeah, right.
And so you go back and say, what is the point of fear and trauma? In this case, it's probably trauma. And again, I'm totally, armchair, thoughts over here. So, for whatever it is, I'm not a professional counselor or anything. But my thought seems to be that there's something about doing that publicly.
Yeah.
That says something not to Chris Rock. See, it wasn't Chris Rock maybe that he was smacking. Yeah. He was smacking everybody who has said something to him about his family. And he needed, there may be some piece of him that needed that to be seen across the world. There may be some part of him that wanted that, you know what, I'm going to let everybody who's watching know right now. Very intentionally. Again, it may be subconscious, but that he's that he wants everyone to know, listen, enough with attacking me and my family. And so I've been doing it quiet up to this point, and I decided to do it now. And there's a part of me that empathizes with that, right? I'm very angry at the church, right? If I'm honest, I'm very angry. I got a bunch of stories of hurt from the church in my own life that I just have to sit on. I can't talk about those things. I can't, I've been taking the high road,
Sure.
And there is a part of me that's like, you know what? I need to let everybody know, what I'm saying? Like there's a piece that might, pull that out. And there's a part of me that's like, man, if someone was coming to my family like that, maybe I would do that. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it empathetic in some level, to say, hey, at least understand why it is. Now, I hate that it happened. You know what I'm saying? I hate that it happened. I hate that it happened for multiple reasons. But I can definitely get into the mind of him with that. Let me see. What's that? Shelly's got a comment.
Go ahead while you're looking at that comment. And I think partially too, and we're not going to get necessarily off of Will here, but I think even with Jada, like when I watched it, like I felt like Jada had it handled in the sense of she had, many times, like when somebody makes a joke about a person, the way that the person responds determines and lets the audience know how they're supposed to feel about the joke. Right. And so when the camera was on Jada and he'd get the joke, she rolled her eyes and was like, I'm not taking this. And everybody's like, oh, they figured, oh, this is actually not a good joke because Jada doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that might have done it. And this is where I think when I'm hearing conversations about patriarchy and all these things of like, there's lots of people who are like, yeah, that's what you need to do to protect your woman. You need to go about that. Right. And look, I'm not going to say I haven't been in the same situation, right? But there's also the question of, okay, but did Jada handle it? Did she need him to do that in that moment, right then? And so that's just
right. And that's the part where you say you don't want to let Chris Rock get away with that, especially if it's hurt your wife. And of course, she's got the condition and could be very simple. We don't know. We're not in their living room, so we don't know how well
she
Jada is handling all of that.
right.
And so, for all we know, she didn't want to come tonight because
Mhm.
she, you know, like who
She
knew
felt
it?
self-conscious about they could have
Right?
had a
Who knows?
conversation about her hair right before
Right,
the interview.
right before the thing. And so here someone's calling that very thing out, and he feels he needs to protect her. But uh, yeah, but I forget where I was headed with that. Yes. Um,
Well, you were saying, I mean, there's this again, there's this idea of like,
the right way to handle it.
what's the
Yeah.
right way
So
to handle it?
yeah. So most of us would say, like, look, here's what could have worked really well. He wins the Oscar without all that happening. He wins the Oscar. He gets up and he just praises his wife. Gets up and he says, "Look, I just want to thank Jada. She's beautiful." He tells the world, "Hey, you know, she's going through this thing, as everybody knows, because she's already said it." And
Uh-huh.
and he just praises her, and the contrast just makes Chris Rock look like a
Exactly.
hee-haw, you know, in the middle of all that. And even if he wants to go and confront Chris Rock afterwards,
Right.
and not let him know that he can't get away with that, he can still do that too, right?
Sure.
You don't have to let nobody ride. There's more than one way to skin the particular cat, right? Nobody, you know, macho man Randy Savage is not the only way to deal with issues, and it's not the only way to deal with, you know, just come out Ultimate Warrior. You know, not everything has to be dealt with that way. Sometimes things need to go there, but you don't have to do that, and to not do that isn't cowardice. You know, to have a kind of control over how you're going to hold someone accountable
That's the
is wisdom. It's not a choice of whether you're going to hold someone accountable or not. You're going to hold them accountable. You're just going to do it. You're going to do it in a way that honors everyone. And in a saner space, I think 2, 5, 6 years ago, maybe Will Smith doesn't do what he
right.
does, you know. Um, but and then of course Chris Rock, he makes the joke, and I don't know if Chris Rock knew that she had the condition or not, and if he didn't, then he could be kind of excused, maybe, right? Because
Well, look,
everybody's getting jokes made of them. But if he
I
did
know.
know, then and this is the part where should we, yeah, talk about comedians and stuff.
Well, and that's look, and well, but here's the thing too about Chris Rock. Like, he has a documentary about black hair. Like,
Yeah, that's
he has a
true.
documentary about black women's hair. Of everybody, he should know better than to try to point people's attention to a black woman's hair as a joke. I don't know if he
Yeah,
knew about the alopecia. Like, if he knew about the alopecia, that's cold blooded, right? We
that
could just
is
chalk this off
that is
as
cold blooded. If he knew that she was suffering from this condition and he
right.
came out and made fun of that condition,
Yeah, absolutely. But if
that's
he
tough.
doesn't, then you just have to chalk it up as you just were a moron in this moment, right? Like, for all the reasons you've set up for yourself. You made the good hair thing, so you told us you understand this, and then you make a joke about it. That's just
Yeah.
bad judgment. Now, here's where I think the Academy Awards plays into this, right? The Academy Awards have created a kind of rule of engagement at the Oscars, right? For decades, the role of the host, the role of the presenters is to kind of do a semi Hollywood roast of the top leaders in the most powerful, if you will, of Hollywood, right? Because they feel like we should be able to roast you because we are showing people today that you are the best of the best. So we're going to roast you. And if you're watching the rest of the Academy Awards, there was lots of roasting going on,
Sure.
lots of it. And so I think that the Academy Awards has created that sort of space where that happens regularly. And so it might be just a moment of time before you catch the wrong person in the wrong mood where this happens, right? And unfortunately, it was Will Smith yesterday, and very
Yeah.
frustrating to watch that piece.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think they use that to try to humanize.
yeah,
If I can say it, is that the right word? You
well, yeah. I
know,
mean, you got these people who are just ridiculously talented,
bring them down to earth
beautiful,
or whatever,
and
poke some holes at their
sure,
eliteness,
yeah.
to say, hey, we don't take ourselves that seriously. And so they
Right.
bring a comedian on to come out and make fun of everybody who's jealous that they who's
Yeah.
the ire of the jealousy that of the subject of jealousy that all of us, like some of us who wish we were there, like, hey,
Sure.
I wish I were there. I wish I were wearing that. I wish I were doing that. So, I mean, I get it, but yeah,
Well,
you're right. I mean,
I think it's not only rules of engagement the academy, it's rules of engagement in entertainment. Right. One of the things, and when I was going through my undergrad, we were talking about the mark of an unhealthy society. A mark of an unhealthy society, or excuse me, I'll say it like this: the mark of a healthy society is when you can make fun of the leader and the powerful with no consequences. Right? Like when you can do Saturday Night Live, where you're just making fun of presidents and whatever, and the president isn't calling down, military to go destroy the studio that did it. That's a healthy society because the president and the people in charge are like, hey, but I'm in charge, right? Like like, sure, you make fun of me, like I've got power though. I'm not worried about you. But the mark of an unhealthy society is the opposite, right? When you make fun of power and that power strikes back at you, which of course we've seen. I think that's part
sure,
of where we are right now is that
sure.
there's a sense of which power strikes back when those underlings, if you will, says something about it. And
Yeah,
I think that may be a component to show us how unhealthy we are in our society and the trauma that we are experiencing right now.
yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah,
So that I think that's at least when I'm thinking about sort of the immediate response. I'm trying to. There's more there, I'm sure, and I'd love to hear from others. I see you pulled up Shelley's deal where she's talking about in his autobiography. He talked about a lot of shame,
yeah,
guilt that he carries. Not standing up for his mom when she was being abused. And interestingly enough, in his acceptance speech, he kind of alludes to this sort of complicated thing that his mom was not there with him tonight. Like she said, he was like, it's complicated. My mom isn't here. She's got this knitting, club that she's watching it with. And it was almost like my mom chose to kind of stay with the knitting club as opposed to come and support me at the Oscars. And you're thinking, oh, that might be going around in his head as well. You know what I
mm,
mean? And
yeah,
he's thinking, I never
potentially.
protected my mom during abuse. My wife's getting this said. I just did a movie about protecting, whatever that's protecting these people. And it just, okay, I'm gonna go and do this. I'm gonna knock it out.
Mm.
And he just
And
said,
we've just got that energy in the country. We've got that protection energy in the country, and we've also got that testosterone
well, is it test I mean, yeah, there's
in
definitely a
the country.
testosterone place, but
Um,
if I could, I mean, you're kind of bringing up
bravado is what I mean, right? Yeah, you got, and so when you start talking about conversation that we're typically in and political conversations, some of the cultural conversations, we're in this space. We got a war going on.
uh-huh.
We're in this space where there's just contention, and it's almost celebrated. Contention is celebrated, and sometimes we need it. Sometimes that the weak need to be protected. We're in this odd space where Will Smith has chosen to protect his family, and normally protecting someone is what we would like, what we want,
Yeah.
that's honorable and good. And and yet there's a way that you go about doing that somehow messes with how effective it is,
Mhm.
and there may be something true, correlation or metaphorically to many of the ways we are engaging protection, even culturally, but that might be stretching too much. We don't have to get into all of that.
Well, no, I don't know if I don't know if I'd stretch it into the way the society is dealing with protection, but the one of the first things I thought about, at least this morning, when I saw, the famous picture that's now out there with Rock kind of like, and Will's got his hand down. I immediately started thinking, this is a perfect representation of how we deal with conflict in our society right now. Like
Right.
it's a perfect representation. Somebody says something that you don't like, and your response is to, as I'm not gonna say it the way Rock said it, but to slap the crap out of somebody, either physically or verbally. Right?
Right.
We do it on Twitter and Facebook and on
Right.
Instagram. Like we are immediate to, and it's even to, and my wife was saying this the other earlier, and I loved it. It's even almost like a performance art, right? Like if you and Will, I think, modeled that a little bit. Like if you just look at the whole clip, right? You have Rock saying what he's saying. You have this response by Jada. Will is actually laughing in the last clip you see before he walks up. And then all of a sudden something happens. Rock is talking, right? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, here it comes, right? And Will starts walking towards the stage. And the audience is like expecting some kind of altercation, but the altercation is, so we're watching, it's that where somebody's watching like popcorn, what's about to happen. Now we're expecting it to be kind of the dozens, right? We're expecting the altercation to look like this thing that happens in the Black community where, oh yeah, your mama's so fat, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, your mama's so fat, blah, blah, blah. And so we're like, oh good, Will's going to go, he's going to now kind of one up Rock on something, right? And so we're all waiting for that kind of, and it's a performance art. Like we're getting the crowd ready, the oohs and ahs coming up, everybody's gathering around. What's he going to say about Rock? And then he smacks him. And everybody immediately thought, oh, this is a bit, because it couldn't imagine that would be the response to what happened. Surely they worked this out. To your point, they were both comedians. Will Smith he made a living ultimately like razzing people, razzing the rich, middle class Black people all through his show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So surely he would understand us. So maybe they came and created this. And then after he smacked him, Will turns to walk back, and you see him kind of like straighten his tux and get kind of a smirk, like, all right, I handled that. Almost to you were talking about this earlier, almost as if to say to the watching audience, I handle my business. I don't let this kind of stuff talk. You know what it reminded me of, and you'll appreciate this. When I saw that after a couple of minutes, I was like, it reminds me of that scene in American Gangster where Denzel Washington is sitting in a coffee shop talking to some guys, and he sees this dude who owes him money in the street, and he says, Jesus, give me a second. And he walks out into the street, and he approaches. At this point, we didn't know who this guy was. Idris Elba wasn't known very well, but he approaches Idris Elba, and he's like, "Hey, you owe me some money." Idris Elba's like, "I ain't paying you no blah 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 blah." And Denzel pulls out a gun, and it's just like, "What you gonna do with that?" And he shoots him in the face, full crowd around on the street.
Right.
Shoots him, and then the dude's on the ground. He puts his gun away, walks back to the coffee shop, sits down with the guys, and like, now, what was I saying? You know what I mean? Like, he was so confident in his ability to engage in violence without repercussion that he would do it in a performance way. Like, I'm going to do this in front of an audience,
right,
so as to let people know how powerful I am, right? And so it felt a little bit like that in the moment. Into all the things you were saying, this might have been, again, it may not have necessarily been about Chris Rock, even though they have this history of engaging, where he talked about Jada at the Oscars in 2016, where he did a post in 2018 about Jada, sort of. This could be his moment to show all the watching crowd that he is as hard as he says he is. And I know, it's
harder than people
harder
saying
than people have given. And it's hard. It's hard to be. It's hard to be the merger Black person in the community. It's hard. It's easier to just be fully assimilated or go towards the sort of militant space, right? You're given credit for either one of those. If you go fully assimilated, you're getting credit by the white people, and you can just hang out there with them. If you go fully militant, for the most part, the Black community is fully with you. But when you play that middle, that merger, like there is sort of a way in which the Black community and the white community deal with you, as if you are soft, as if you don't have feelings, as if you are not Black enough, or you're too Black, or whatever.
Or you're unable to. I get all the time, you're not able to make a stand, or you don't stand for anything. I'm like, absolutely.
I mean, there's aspects of that, but I'm just talking like the sense of identity of Blackness.
Yeah, with regard to Black. With regard to the ethnic piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for him, right? He has always had kind of in the back, although he's been successful, although he's made millions of dollars, although he's got Oscars, all these things, his community has looked at him like almost like at times like a sellout, because his music was acceptable to white people. His movies and his TV shows were stuff that white people loved. Like, growing up, nobody's watching Martin, but they're watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, white people, as far as white people are concerned. So what does Will Smith do? He attaches himself to Martin Lawrence in a series, Bad Boys, where now he's attached to this Black figure that all Black people were all down because of Def Comedy Jam and all these things. And so there's maybe this sense of not feeling fully accepted by his community, and that he maybe thought making this stand on public TV in front of everybody
Mm,
would finally get him the acceptance in his community that he
mm.
desired.
I
I'm
wonder. I
just
mean, it'd be good to sit down with him and try to figure it out. I wonder if it's the dad husband in him, or if it's how much of it. Let me say it
yeah,
this way: how
how
where
much
the ratio is between the family dynamic and the black and white racial dynamic. I bet all of it
plays in there.
plays in. Yeah, and it's just a general man, the emasculation piece. It's the same thing. Look,
Mhm.
somebody disrespects my wife.
Yeah,
I'm not far away from putting my hands on somebody.
absolutely. Yeah,
You know,
by the grace of God.
I like to say that I would try to find a way to diffuse the situation, but I'm pretty frustrated today. And so if I were to go somewhere today and someone were to do it, I'm closer to losing myself today
Yeah,
than I was yesterday. And who knows?
it's good to know. I won't
It just
entice
yeah,
you.
don't
I
come
won't
by.
convince you. Won't
Don't
convince
push any buttons. It'll
you.
be
Okay,
a tough
all right,
day for
all right.
such a
Good to
thing.
know. Good to know.
The other part though, and I'm gonna move into sort of this
Yeah, I think you're right.
Christian space, was I wasn't thinking about anything to do with church or Christian. It was
No,
all black. It was
yeah,
all look, but this is gonna be tough for the black community. It's tough for all of us. We, this ridiculous standard that black people have to be perfect and better and above, in order to keep repercussions from happening to the rest of us socially and all that.
uh-huh.
So there's that. But then he started mentioning, when he got up and spoke,
Yeah,
he got up and he started mentioning things about God.
yeah,
And he said, and I don't have it right in front of me, I should, but he said something to do with um God. He has thinking about the purpose God has for him,
right.
and that God is asking him to do something. And I thought, again, complicated. I thought two things. The first thing I thought was, wait a minute, Phil, Will Smith has said in the past that he's not Christian. He was raised with a Christian heritage, but he is not Christian and doesn't believe all of that Christian stuff, right? That's what he said several years ago.
Okay.
I think he was on Oprah or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was like, I just, and his views about marriage shifted. That's when they was asking about marriage. A lot of his morals shifted. And they were wondering where that came from, and it wasn't Christianity. So I was surprised to hear that Will would mention God at all,
Right.
because he doesn't. He's so far self-proclaimed that he doesn't believe in God. Now, here's the kicker, and here's part of what I have frustration about today. Well, maybe I won't get into the frustrated part, but so my thought when he says God, I'm thinking two things. One,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh no, he's about to use God to justify himself in
Mhm.
this attack. And boy, we've seen that happen by black, white, and otherwise
Yeah.
in history and in present day. And that part makes me sick to my stomach. It's the using of God's name in vain in that sense.
Right. The truer sense.
But the second part of me was like, but somebody's been talking to him about God.
Mhm.
Is the other thought that I had, because I
Okay.
know that he was anti-God. So perhaps he's on a journey that's getting him closer or bringing him back to who God is. And this is part of his journey,
Yeah.
right? And we have him mention Denzel, and Denzel talks about, the devil comes at you when you're at your highest point. And
Right.
who is the devil to a person that's not a Christian, right? What is
Right.
that? That's just mumbo jumbo. But that meant something to Will. So there's a part of me that made me think, is it possible that Will is on this journey back to Christ, and in the midst of all of this turmoil that he's been experiencing for the last several years in his life, right? That could be, being frustrated by the situation. And that made me really grateful for that potentiality, made me really grateful for people like Denzel Washington, who seems to be taking a more Christian viewpoint, who could stand there and speak into Will's ear something meaningful. I'll stop there and then I'll talk about the frustrating part after that. But those are the things. Like, I hear him mention God, a purpose. I hear him saying he wants to be a vessel of love, right? And
Yeah.
all that sounds to me like someone
That's
who's in
important.
recovery, if you will. That sounds like somebody who's coming out of an addiction, who just fell back into a pattern, but is saying that they want to not be like that, right? So so that is part of what I'm wondering. And Charlotte, you make a good point. It may not be the God of the scriptures that he was talking about, but I know Denzel was not talking about when he's talking about God and the devil. He's talking about the God and the devil of the scriptures. But I just wonder if that's where he's headed. So I don't know. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, yeah, you know, he kind of the way he said it was, I'm overwhelmed by what God is calling me to do and be in this world. And to Charlotte's point, we don't know who this God is that he's talking about, but I think, you know, as I've watched kind of the internet engage with this thought process, I think they have struggled with it in a couple of ways. One is, yes, this idea, I want to be a vessel of my love, a vessel for my people, a vessel for love, a protector, right? But this, he said this protector, but then he calls himself a vessel of love. And and to most people who are looking at this, love does not look like, you know, going and smacking somebody in the face in the middle of, you know, a speech. Like there may be other ways to engage and to, again, to kind of protect that may look a little different than that. And so they're having a hard time sort of analyzing reconciling the two things. And then also because of the violence of it, right? Sort of this slapping that going on in it, and there's a woman involved in this. Not necessarily that she's the victim of the slap, but she's definitely the victim of a kind of you know, a comment, if you will. And so I think I've seen people kind of triggered by where he connects himself to God. Now he becomes a part of the patriarchal system inside of the church that says that they're trying to protect, but also hurt people while they do it. Right. Like I've seen, you know, where he says, you know, love makes people do crazy things. Right. And I've seen on the internet, yeah, that's what every abuser says after they abuse their kids or their spouse. Right. And so I've just seen people sort of grab onto that. It may be a stretch, perhaps, but it's a triggering one, particularly when now God is entered into the space, because people are looking for a reason, I think, to disqualify the scriptures, disqualify God in the midst of usefulness in society, and having, you know, a guy who and here's the deal: not everybody talks about God when they do a speech anymore. You know, remember when we were kids, like everybody was like talking about God, and then there was this moment where I think they were all like, you know what, we're actually not interested in God, and I don't know if God actually helped me with this, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. So when somebody gets up and they actually mention God in an acceptance speech, there's no like gain for him with that in Hollywood. Like he doesn't gain anything in Hollywood for doing that. In fact, he puts himself in a spot where they're like, what do you mean by that? Right. And here he chooses.
And most people, when he says God, they're assuming he means Bible
Christian
God.
Yeah, because you have to make the distinction just in our culture. If you're going to say it, like, you have to distinguish it so the people don't hear you incorrectly. So he generalizes God, so we just assume it's kind of the Judeo-Christian God. He's not getting anything from that in Hollywood to do that, so it must be important to him. And in a few minutes earlier, we saw you smack somebody across the face. Is that how God does love? Again, people may have their own thoughts about that, but I think that's where people are trying to reconcile that a bit.
Yeah.
So that was a bit.
Right. And again, it's all quarterback, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking or whatever. It's all we don't know for certain, but I imagine the potential that Will Smith is re-engaging his roots, his Christian roots, while exercising this other thing, and in the process of that, stuff gets mixed up, right? And so there's a potential from a believer, from a Christian point of view. Like if I'm in Hollywood as a Christian, what I want to know is, I want to talk to Will, but I want to know about this God thing. Like I want to discover where are you with that? Like what let's talk about that, right? What I'm frustrated by, and it's probably the thing that has me in the bad mood that I'm in today, is I've seen repeated posts on social media of people just speaking about the depravity of Hollywood and the who cares. That's the line. Who cares about what happens over there? I couldn't care less. There's a bunch of depraved leftist liberals who just want to get on their soapboxes and good. I'm glad something happened, or I don't care if something happened or not. And it's just that disposition right there is that approach to, first of all, who cares? The answer is Jesus cares. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get into some self-righteous thing, but I think anytime you ask the question, who cares? The answer is Jesus, right? So you ask the question, who cares about what just happened? Jesus cares about what just happened.
Sure.
He wants to know what he wants to get into that. He wants to reconcile that and fix that. Okay, I'm gonna get into that. But what's frustrating is this view, this increasingly contentious, demonizing spirit that's rising in the evangelical and sometimes otherwise church that sees other people as damned to hell and therefore has decided they're just going to take their hands off of them. They're like, you know what? Forget it. You guys are out there, to hell with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally.
And literally. And it frustrates me to all get out that the position that so many Christians have is, well, good riddance or whatever, or who cares, or anything like that. I don't think that's becoming of Jesus at all. I think Jesus is on his way to Hollywood in the same way that he's on his way to Samaria. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like, man, I gotta go there. That's what he said. He said, man, I gotta go there. Right. And I just think, you know, the situation has a lot of stuff over here, but when he starts talking about God, that's a glimmer of hope to me. Now, I know I'm also frustrated that he's given that picture, and like what you just said, Marcus, like I understand that he can't get up there, quote unquote, wearing the God t-shirt while smacking somebody and calling that love.
It's definitely hard to reconcile.
That's hard to reconcile. But if there's room for grace, right? But if there's room for grace, right, it is. And but we also can understand. We also understand why someone might hit somebody who's talking crazy about their family.
Sure.
But if there's room for grace, if there's room for will to return to Christ, and he's not quite there yet, do we hurt his prospects to come back to Christ by dismissing him, by saying, you know what, he's just a part of that Sodom and Gomorrah over there in LA, and you know, good riddance, God, rain the fire on them. We're better off without them. No, Abraham is contending for Sodom and Gomorrah. He's saying, don't bring it, right? Can you find 150, 20, 10, right? And the disposition that Christians have when it comes to things like this demonizing and this letting people go, and it's the sort of thing that causes will to run backwards into the world instead of maybe potentially running forward. And it's that stuff that just really is that, and I see that often in several spaces. It just really, 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 really is frustrating to me.
I get that for sure. You know, it makes me think about Kanye. When, you know, a couple of years ago, Kanye came out with his gospel albums and whatnot. And remember, he had that track where he's like, I'm trying to make this change. And who are the people who are against me the most? I'm hearing nothing but it's the Christians who are against me. Like, right. I'm trying to like figure this out. But the Christians seem to be against me. And shouldn't the Christian be the one who is vying for you, who is who is hoping the best for you and trying to bring you along? And to the point that you were talking about, yes, Will may be on a journey. And again, we come from sort of this Christian thought process in our background, where there's this idea, as soon as you come to Christ, like you're immediately changed, like all the way through, like you're not gonna make any decisions,
right?
Like whatever,
right?
As opposed to this idea that you're on a journey, right? And so Will is trying, maybe going through that journey, and here he reverts back to the flesh in this moment. I am not. Well, I'm not gonna say all that, but as a Christian, we need to go and think about it in that way, right? How do you sit down if you're Denzel with Will and go, okay, I'm hearing this thing of God that you're talking about. Let's talk about when you say love, like what does that look like for you? And look, if this thing that Shelley was talking about, the autobiography about his wife getting, or his mother getting abused all his life, that's kind of how he learned what love looked like, right? Historically, in his mind, that love had violence associated with it. At least in his the understanding of a kid in an abusive home's understanding of love, right? So what is he dealing with in that? So I don't know what to do with it, but I'm curious.
I do like that Denzel and I don't know where Tyler Perry is with his faith. I haven't I don't know if he's made any you know denouncements or anything like that. But I do appreciate that Denzel went over there. And I think he went over there as a believer. And it makes me wonder if there's more going on in the mind and heart of Will than we know from a spiritual point of view. And I would hate for that to be undone because Christians are on Twitter throwing him into hell before God has made a judgment. Well, and suddenly now he's like, you know what, I'm not sure I want to be anything like that. Ironically,
right,
they are spiritually slapping Will in the face in a way that Will is slapping Chris in the face, as if to say, you know what, you're nothing to me, you know. And I just think that's utterly and ridiculous. And somebody's in the room like, Antoine, you know, that's impractical and all this type of stuff. I think it's the high standard that Jesus sets for us. I have a hard time believing that Jesus is walking away from Will. I think he's trying to walk toward Will, you know. And if we're going to follow Jesus, I think we have to figure out what that looks like. And I don't know what it looks like in McKinney, but I think we have to resist our own sense of judgment of people and things, because you don't know what God's doing with people now, and how close or far away they are.
Here's the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Are we only talking about this and giving Will grace because he's black? Right? Like,
I think I'm giving him grace because he said, for this Christian side of it, it's because he mentioned God and he gave me this glimmer of, is he dealing with something spiritual? And that's where the
if he had not mentioned
pastor God, in me,
would you still?
I would be dealing with I will be dealing with the blackness and the family side of things.
But I mean, would you still feel this idea of we need to walk toward him in this space, right? If he hadn't mentioned God, do you think Christians would have jumped on him the way that they?
I think yes. I think they would have jumped on him, and it's hard for me to say whether I would have been happy about them jumping on him or not. You know, I mean, not happy. I don't think I've ever happy, but I don't know that I would feel what I currently feel.
Okay.
You know, I heard with young adults, I'm always listening for a moment when God's trying to do something. With I say with young adults, with whoever I'm dealing with. And I heard something that sounded to me like God was working on Will a little bit, at least the potential.
Right.
And that makes me want to I wish the church would, I'm hoping that a Christian community floods to Will, right? Instead of you know, attacking, to hold him accountable, but also to help him continue his journey, if that's true.
And then there's also just the flooding toward him. Like, if he had never mentioned God before, when you see,
you could just flood toward him anyway. Yeah.
When you see men and women engaging in that kind of altercation, if you want to call it that, or that moment, particularly in national television, shouldn't we as a Christian, even if they haven't given any glimmers of I like Jesus and all that stuff, like run to this kind of prayer for them as opposed to kind of a judgment for them? And that's across the board. And I think that's where
I think that's true.
Period. You know what I mean? Like, this is where, as we get into these conversations, we get to, you know, this election that's coming up in a couple of years. Like, these are the kinds of things that we have to be practicing now so that we can practice them then, you know. And it's not just this sort of like I'm going to be running after the people who have similar ideals than me, those who are attached to my ethnic group, those who are attached to my political group, right? Like we've got to do this across the way. It's look, I was preaching at a church this weekend and I was doing the story of the Good Samaritan, and you and I talked a little bit about it before. The person who fell among robbers, it says a man fell among robbers. And what's fascinating about the Greek of that particular term is that it doesn't have a label, like it doesn't have a gender specification. It really means a person, someone fell among robbers. Now, if we look at the story and we were to make that a Jewish person, then all of a sudden the Samaritan's response seems heroic, right? If it's a Samaritan who fell among robbers, like it doesn't seem as heroic because he's just engaging the person who's like him. What good is that? Everybody who loves those who are like them. And I think both of those are absolutely true in things that we need to engage. But I think more simplistically, when Jesus says a person fell among robbers and we see the Samaritan engage, the fact that he, of the three people that saw this cat, engaged, and it says with compassion, helps us to believe that my neighbor is loving my neighbor is not just about loving my enemy. And it's not just about loving my friend. It's about loving anyone, everyone and anyone, no matter the label.
Yeah.
And I think that's
and the challenge is always to ask, what does it look like to love like Jesus?
Yeah.
Love this person like Jesus in this moment. And it looks different, because Jesus interfaced with people differently. But you're absolutely right. I'm of the persuasion that when Jesus says love your enemy, he's not talking about people you get to have. Like, I don't believe Christians get to have enemies.
Yeah.
I think in the sense that they hate people or they push people away. I think people have people who see them as enemies.
Yeah.
And they get, I think Christians should get treated like an enemy by people who demonize them, but Christians should be in no place to make an enemy, right. to
sure.
create an enemy or label someone an enemy.
Right.
You're a neighbor. And even to the point of death. And again, the very high standard of Jesus is to do that all the way to the point that he's hanging on a cross, pleading for forgiveness, interceding for the forgiveness of those who put him there just a few seconds ago.
Yeah.
Or a few minutes ago. And so the high standard of loving people like Jesus means no one is your enemy. You don't get to demonize anybody, which means that Hollywood or the other political party or the whatever are not your enemies. Uh-huh. And so when something like this happens, you don't get to say good riddance.
Right. To hell.
You don't get to say, oh, well, that's they're going to hell in the handbasket anyway. Those people are nuts. And that type of thinking, I've yet to find where Jesus says that.
Right.
And does things like that. And if the church is going to be a place that responds practically to real life, right, we've got to find a way to be a oasis in times like this, for people who are like trying to figure out what to do and what's right and what's good and how to love well. And unfortunately, we are perpetuating the same sort of contention, this sense of fight, this sense of, overcoming this addiction to power that we have. And it just shows up in how we respond to moments like this. And these are from the people who would call themselves the most fundamental and Christian, biblically based sola scriptura people, steady taking the people who Jesus died for and throwing them into hell because you think you can.
Right.
And it's a very sad state for our witness.
Okay, last conversation. I put it into the chat here. What do you think? What you kind of mentioned some ideas. If it's you, what do you do? Or I don't even know if it's you. Maybe. Well, maybe.
I was like, okay, so maybe. Like, because I have yeah. So I'm not
hard again. Let me just be a caveat. We cannot put ourselves fully into this situation because there are so many things going on in that moment. It's not an isolated event.
Yeah.
As much as most violence that you see, it's not usually an isolated thing, but it's a microcosm of something else that's bigger. But just for the giggles of it, if you will, like it's you. How do you think you respond? Not how you want to, but or maybe it's how you want to.
Well, I'm working on. So like as a youth, I had a really bad temper, and I've always been really reticent to let that temper flow. Um, and my core disposition is angry. I'm often fighting anger,
Mhm.
and so if I'm in that position with Will, um, I cannot say that I would not have that. There's no chance that I would have done what he wouldn't have done what he did. In fact, what he did fits into my non-Jesus self. Like I would absolutely get up and make the statement to correct the issue, especially if I felt like I was pushed there. Um so you know, I can't say that I would not have done that. I like to say that I've worked on that well enough that you know that I don't lose my temper very much, and I think hopefully some people will be surprised to even know that I had a really bad temper. But I'm pretty scared of the Hulk um, that resides inside, and I do my best Bruce Banner to keep the old Hulk down, and I think the Lord has been helpful for that. So you know, pushed in the moment, you know, it, it's a possibility. What now? That's in my lower moment. In my better, if you will, my better moment, I'm definitely not letting Chris Rock get away with that, especially if it matters to Lisa. If it's my Lisa right there, and I look over there and there's a look. Oh, I'm at least talk. We at least gonna have a conversation. We are at least having a conversation about how he needs to go ahead and slow his roll on all of that. But if I would have won, I told you what I would have do. I would have got
Yeah.
up there and I would have made Chris Rock look really small. I would have taken what he said and not only made him feel small, but made every person who laughed feel small by over lavishing praise to my wife for her beauty. I would have done that, and I would have made it very clear um, that we didn't appreciate it, but I would have done it in that way. I think that's what I would have done. Who he probably, you know, again, he did it so quick, you know, so maybe he
Well,
would have
but
done
it
it.
wasn't
Maybe he would have done the same thing had he known that he win the award. And
no.
then backstage, again, there's a confrontation. Now I ain't trying to. Again, I don't want Hulk to come out, so I'm trying not to throw no hands because
Mhm.
I might not get up off of you. This
Right.
is real talk. You know, that might be the end. So I don't want to do that. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're similar. I'm not proud of many of my Hulk moments historically. Um, I think probably the difference that you and I have is, you know, I had to like all through my elementary days, I was getting uh I was getting treated as sort of this outsider, the N word, all kinds of different things. And I found myself fighting constantly in the midst of that. And what I've had to do is figure out a way, it's this idea, it's kind of like the conversation around fragility that we have. You know what I mean? Like over time, you build up these calluses, you build up the calcium in which when things hit you now, you just don't feel it the same way, right? The response that I had as an elementary school to the N word being called the N word, uh, my response is completely different now because I've had so many encounters that I've had to work to that. And I grew up in a space that I was always outnumbered. If I decided to go at it, I was outnumbered. If I decided to go at it, I was the one who was going to feel the gross punishment as opposed to the person I was in altercation with. And so I grew in the understanding of, and there was a space in which I was really led and taught, you are the representative here, right? You are the only black person here. You represent all of us in every moment that you find yourself in. And so to find myself, if I'm in Will's situation, I probably am more afraid of being the one who who communicates who gives the bigot the satisfaction. I'm more worried about that than I am about what has happened. And my anger is fueled by the fact that I could not take retribution the way that I desired to in
That
that
you
moment.
had to
That I had to be,
hold it in.
I had to be Barack Obama in this moment to do it. And so I probably, if I took your road of praising my wife on the stage, if I won the Oscar, I don't think it would sound like I'm actually praising my wife. I think I would be making very clear assertions that I'm talking about Chris Rock's comment.
Absolutely.
Right. Which could also look just as bad as if I had gone up and smacked him in the face, because I was wasting my energy and my time of an award and making it about Chris Rock when it was about the thing that I had just won, and completely shown Chris Rock that he will never have this. Right. Definitely in the after party, we would have had some words. Now, again, when I say have words, I would have had multiple hours to think about it. I may have been talked to. I may have talked to some other folks. I would have breathed myself out, and I would have definitely approached him, because I might have known, I may have run. It's a small Hollywood world. I might have run into Rock some other place and be like, "Hey, man, let's holler at you real quick. I don't appreciate what you said about my wife. Man, what are you talking about? It's just a joke." No, I understand, but you have to understand. I don't know if you've seen what my wife's been saying about Alopecia, and I'm hoping that Chris would be like, "Oh." Right. And I'm like, "And didn't you make a documentary about hair? Like, man, you literally were up in front of everybody making a black woman look bad about hair." Again, my wife wouldn't have been a black woman. It would have been a white woman. But if she was, I would have brought that in and tried to help him to see the ways in which he was actually slowing down the progress of himself in slowing down the progress of me and my wife. And would have said, and would have not demanded, but hopefully, as I've done historically, been able to talk this cat into making a public confession of like, "Hey, that was not the right way to handle it. We talked about it. We squashed all that. I apologize to Marcus for doing that. It wasn't the right way to handle it. This is not the way we need to be talking." I think that's where I would have gone. Again, probably because, again, I am more concerned about becoming the angry black man and giving people the excuse than probably other things. And I'm not saying that's right. I just know that that's how I grew up.
No.
So
yeah, and I think the Christian root is, how do we get reconciliation?
Yeah.
And ultimately you want to go and say, you gotta have that conversation with Chris.
Yeah,
that's okay. It's scripture. Jesus
well, no, the
says,
problem is I've got reconciliation tattooed on the very arm I would have hit him. That's like, part of it. It's like, you can't even hit him, because it's like you got catalog.
You're right. Reconciliation after he done did,
like, look, let me cover
with his broken jaw. Yeah,
real quick before I give you not recompense but reconciliation. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that would be you that's what you want to see, because the end game is what you said. You want Chris to come out and say, "Listen," you want that contrite valuation affirming of Will from Chris to say, and Will and Jada to say, "Hey, I was joking, I didn't," or whatever. And for that to be authentic and real, the product of a real conversation that two people had that squared away. Because I don't think that Chris Rock hates Jada. I think he's just a comedian who came out and said jokes, and he just hit the wrong person with his joke. Sure. That's my opinion of it. So I think if they were to sit down and have the conversation, I think it would have been a reasonable one. I think Chris Rock would have retreated relatively quickly, especially given his recent thing.
Right in here, just to insert, Will Smith tells a story about when he was a kid. He was in high school, and he was the guy who was walking in the cafeteria, throwing jokes, hazing people, whatever. And one day he said the wrong thing to the wrong person, and the guy came, put his deadbolt that you use for your locker, put it around his hand, and knocked Prince out. I said Prince went way back at that. Wow, because that's who he was back then. And he says, and I don't remember, I saw an interview, he was like, "That's when I realized that words matter, and that I need to understand my words." So he he is the guy that did the same thing just to be funny. He's just razzing people, right? So I think he might have understood maybe what Chris was trying to engage in. So
maybe again, it depends on where he's at. Shelley makes a good point here.
Yeah.
she says to tend to Jada first, and that we're kind of leaving her out of the conversation, which I think she's probably right. I mean, I think
She has
we
called it out. We are
I
definitely
know
taking on the patriarch. At least me, I'm taking on
we
the
have talked
patriarchal
about
like
Will
man.
and Chris, and I do think what's funny is not funny. What's interesting is Jada. If Will wasn't there,
Yeah.
Jada has no problem with standing up and telling
Oh.
telling Chris what's up anyway. But I do think that yeah, the whole reason why I think Will would do anything that we talked about would be because he's defending the honor of his family,
Sure.
And so in some ways she's the subject, and we're all trying to figure out how to respond to the fact that she was offended. But yeah, I do. You know what? That's a great point. You get closer to her, and you
tend to her first.
you sort of tend to her to make sure
I would be
to see
seeing
what's
red.
up. She might have, but Jada might have shot that look at him,
Sure.
and he knew. He like,
Jada's,
we not good with this.
Yeah.
Okay, and then he went up there. Now Will Smith, though, he's always hiding behind that smile. So he's smiling all the time, and you don't always know what's hiding behind that smile.
He said that in his speech. He said, "You got to kind of smile and take it."
Yeah,
and that's again. There's a Hulk. I think that, and again, I think there's a Hulk in all of us. I think some people have the freedom to show the Hulk without repercussions and consequences, kind of as not just for themselves but for the people that they represent. Whereas a Will Smith can, if he shows the Hulk, it doesn't just engage and talk about himself; it talks about a whole group of people.
Yeah, the unfortunate narrative is that if you and I show the Hulk, we have lost control, and it's tomfoolery and hoodlum.
Sure.
But if for many cases, if our white counterparts lose the Hulk, then it's manly and it's bold and it's courageous, and you're standing up for something.
And can I give the alternative, the other side? And if I would say from a Black perspective, if you show the Hulk, then this happens. There's also a cost if you don't show the Hulk. There's a whole nother side that's going, you're a coward, you're soft, right? This is where we see even with the way Dr. King handled kind of this nonviolence thing, like it's seen as weakness, nonviolence is, right? So there's the place that a Will Smith or somebody like him in that moment is in, the way that they have to respond to that is difficult. And here we are, we're talking about it, but we're talking about it not as a white person saying this to Will Smith, but a Black person.
Yeah, and someone asked me the other day, or not the other day, this morning, like, hey, would it have been different if this was whatever, Ben Affleck going up and punching Matt Damon or something, for which I don't know. I picked those two names.
Sure.
I don't know what names they take. They said something like Jerry Seinfeld and somebody.
Oh.
But yeah, I think it's different, but it's not different because I think the action is good or bad. I think I would feel the same way about what happened, but what the action means to society is different. I think it is different.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's potential hiring is at stake if Ben Affleck smacks Matt Damon, but if Will Smith, after he slapped Chris Rock, I think someone potentially lost their job today, opportunity in a because they're like, what, I'm not sure about these Black people. They just wilding out these days.
Well, and I was thinking, like, if it was a white dude on stage that said that about Jada, I don't think Will would have done that.
True.
I think there was a familiarity, kind of a Black narrative familiarity that knew that this is something that we can do this way. Right?
So many interesting dynamics there.
And just to go even further, I'm just gonna drop it. If Will Smith had done that to a white person, he would not have been able to sit back down in his seat and not be bothered by any security official. And the fact, and if I could even go, the fact that he did it to a Black person and got to sit back in his seat without the police showing up, I think is a microcosm of what we see sometimes when there are, rebellions in communities and Black people are destroying their community and the police just kind of sit around the rim and just make sure that you don't go anywhere else, but go ahead and knock yourself out here.
Is the hockey referee at that point? You just let him fight. Just let y'all until the swings are done.
Yeah.
That's an interesting. It's an interesting thought. I wonder if that would have been true if he'd got away with those. If he'd even thought to do that, you know, to I don't know, Bill Burr or something. Is it Bill Burr? Who's that guy? One of the guys that really goes at people. One of those comedians. I can't think of his name. But if he'd jumped in, who knows? Well, anyway.
Well,
we talked about a lot of it, and
it's good to kind of, because I was
always the frustration comes always from the church for me.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I'm always more frustrated by the loss of church witness in situations than I am for the black or for any of the other things. Like I get dismayed by those things, but I get angry. I get angry because I think it's because we are out here trying to do this work, and stuff. People just undo the work that you're doing, and it seems so easy to undo.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, gosh, you do all this, you work all this time to get people to inch forward, and then someone wearing your t-shirt shows up, says a cross word or two, and suddenly back 10
yeah
10 feet.
I think I wrote that in something earlier. You know, Will Smith really helped the black, and I say in the black community, because it only complicated it when the church community came in. But I was upset when even with the black space, because I know going into this conversation in the church, when I'm talking about diversity and I'm talking about coming across culturally, that kind of thing stops the church, and particularly the white church, who's been, you know, they've had their own sort of indoctrination into the value of people. I think Will Smith really was a component that actually made white people get a bit more connected to the black community. And I think he brought us forward several inches, but just in that moment probably took us back several feet.
I wonder how many people, and I'm gonna call out the audience. You guys obviously don't raise your hand. It may not be with our Threaded Squad, but I wonder how many white people in America said or thought in their living rooms, see, this is why we don't let black people do stuff. Like, I wonder how many, because you're not going to hear that out loud.
Nobody's
going. No one's going to get on Facebook and say this is why. Well, maybe a few people might, but if I wonder.
Yeah,
I wonder.
And where I grew up, they would say that kind of thing in front of me about other minority groups. Yeah. No, they would say that about Asians, they say that about Hispanics, say that about whatever. And so I knew, if you're going to say that about them when I'm here, then you probably say that about people like me when I'm not here. And so that's where, you know, like, they're going to talk about people in front of you, they're going to talk about you in front of people, right? So, Hey man, good convo. Thanks everybody for jumping in. And I know it was a long one, but I know it's one that people are kind of really wrestling with and thinking about. And I know I wanted to just write something, and I was like, man, there's so much to this.
I know. I do. I have a Facebook post that is halfway written.
Yes, me too. I'm sitting here looking,
and then I'm like, should I write again? This is it.
Yeah.
Do I go out and say what I want to say?
But you said it here, like, you know,
I said it here. I said most of it here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was the same way. I was like, there's so many angles that I want to get into. It would just be forever. So
we should change our podcast to Two Angry Men. But it's a smiling face.
Oh,
the logo is a smiling face. You know, just to mess it up.
You could get somebody else to that with you.
You're not in for that. We'll stick with color commentary.
I'm assuming there's people who already think that that's what this is. Anyway,
that's true, and that's also frustrating. Yeah, wait a minute. You think I'm mad now? Please.
Oh. If I had a
please, you think I'm critical now? Please, I hadn't even said.
I know.
Do you know how many things I don't say? You know how many things I have to summarize?
Exactly. Summarize,
anyway,
take through the filter and ask Jesus to redeem. Sure.
Frustrating things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm off my frustration.
That's all right. Everybody, thank you for joining us for this sort of impromptu color commentary live. We are excited that you guys engaged us, and hopefully, you know, as you were thinking about this, that we were able to give you maybe some insights and some things to think about that you weren't thinking about. that you were able to put on a couple of different lenses and look at things in a new, colorful way. We encourage you as you go forward and as you look at this situation even further and others that may come along that you stay colored.